Hey TV fans, Bored now back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about A Murder at the End of the World, episode 4. The episode is called Family Secrets. Full spoilers from the start of this review. So, another really strong episode. This might actually be my favourite so far, just because I really got into the stuff with Darby and this character of Sean, who's another one of the guests. And just some of the visual stuff with them going on this journey on the ice, and just how dangerous it gets at some point. But just a nice little vibe between the two characters of them getting to know each other, starting to trust each other a bit more. You get a few secrets that come out, and there's a massive reveal at the end of the episode, but it's not the most plot heavy of episodes. It's just little things that are suggested and hinted at. But I mostly just enjoyed it because it was such a tense episode, and again, it had this feel of like a sense of danger and real jeopardy by the end of it. And oh my god, are we going to lose another character? And just little things added. But once again, it kept me on the edge of my seat, even though like it's not the most plot heavy. I think other episodes have had more plot and reveals than this one. But still, lots to be intrigued with. So, Sian is a character. She's the one who was the woman the female astronaut. And that's why this episode and the way it plays out with her and Darby is so perfect. Like the sort of mission they go on, because it's almost like a version of what Sian has done before. But except it's in a snowy setting this time. And like you're sort of swapping like a moon buggy maybe for like a snowmobile. So I do like the kind of symmetry between that, but how it's just changed up a bit. And that is referenced in the episode, because when Sian has this idea for them to go out on the snow, because what it comes from is when Darby tells Sian about the night that she followed Rohan out onto the ice, or onto the outside anyway, and he was doing the Morse code, and he was doing it with someone else, like signaling someone else at the other end somewhere. So they wanted to go out and try and find any clues out there, and Darby naturally says, well, what about the storm? What about the snow? And Sian points out that I've travelled across the moon. I've been on the moon, so this is sort of nothing. And I just like this idea of this adventure they go on, where yeah, you do think about it as a normal person and think these two characters have got to be nuts, but just this logic that we get from Sian, like, yeah, I've been on the moon. This is nothing. This is small fry. And I also like Darby's response, because Sian says, well, if you want, you can stay here. And Darby says, I'm not just going to wait in my room so that someone can drug me when I'm asleep with morphine. So once again, that's a good like reasoning. And there's a couple of lighter touches in this episode. There's a couple of like funnier moments, because there's a line like early in the episode, like literally the first scene when they've gone down into the safe room, where you've got all this paranoia between the guests, and there's this talk about maybe storing the body away, because they're told then the authorities can't get there for something like 72 hours because of the snowstorm, because they want to find out what happened to Rowan. And there's all this talk and paranoia about why isn't Andy down here, and Todd, his assistant, is very vague on it and just says, well, he's up there sorting things out, but he can't be down here right now. But there's a funny line in that sequence where Darby interjects and she says, well, you can't really store it away in the freezer like that, because that's a crime scene, that's evidence you're damaging. And I think it's Mark, his name is, the really jerky character who's a bit full of himself, says fucking millennials. And then one of the other characters like comes back with, well, she's not even a millennial. And I do love that kind of banter and that supercharged back and forth. So there's a couple of funny lines in this episode, which is a welcome like change of pace. And just the tension in that scene, and in the end they're all like let back up, like they get the all clear to go back up, but once again they're imposing like rules on them that they say you've got to stay in your room until like the investigators arrive on the scene in a couple of days. And that's kind of the rules, and they have like their laptops, tablets, whatever taken off them. But another thing that's revealed in this episode, or then Sean tells Darby at one point, is then David is apparently jealous of Lee, because as soon as Lee became pregnant, then the focus kind of switched to their family. And so the work David was doing with Andy kind of took a backseat. So it's just implied that David could have a motivation, but then if anything, he's more motivated maybe to kill Lee, which could put her at threat if he is the killer. But that's just another little snippet. But yeah, Lee comes to Darby and says, I'm sorry, I should have listened to you about Bill, and she now seems to accept that it is foul play. And what I like about this show and the pacing of it and the way it uses the characters is 7 episodes in a way seems like the perfect amount, because it means Darby is clearly going to be the main focus for all of them, but then you get to have like a firm second lead sort of thing in each episode. Like you get to have a character who hasn't really had so much of a spotlight so far. So like Rohan last time, and now it's Sean in this one, and they have good chemistry. But they get, as I said, they go onto the ice to try and find out some clues about who Rohan was contacting. And they go on like the snowmobile, so there's something very action movie or like very suspenseful about it. And they find like a rope that leads into the water, and they also see footprints, so they follow it along, and it's like an inflatable kind of smaller, like, not exactly a raft, but like a boat type thing. And there's like a name on it, but that's what they find. And I think it was good luck or something, but it's been established before that one of the guests, like, they own a boat. It might have been Rohan, I'm not too sure, but then someone who's staying there does own a boat. But that's all they find. Like, they don't really find any other clues type thing, but they don't find the boat itself, but just this smaller thing. So they decide to make their way back, and that's when like potential threats start striking, because the snowmobile malfunctions and then like just won't start again. And again, this show is definitely making you think, because everything seems to be generated through AI in this setting. So it makes you wonder, because we've already gone into the realm of hacking. So have they been hacked? Have they been sabotaged? Because another thing which I almost forgot to mention is that Darby mentions later on, or earlier in the episode, that Rohan's pacemaker was wireless. and that he was being contacted about like it actually being hacked. So that's another layer to this whole thing, this idea of having a wireless pacemaker, which in theory there's probably pluses to that, but it's just on the off chance that it like goes wrong and that someone does hack into it, which is possible with something like that. So once again, that presents the idea of him being killed off rather than it being a natural like heart attack. And I guess it plays with the idea of what exactly is natural when it's all AI sort of control. And so they've been to see the body before that, and there's markings on his neck which implies then he was choked rather than it being a natural thing. But then the heart failing could have caused that, but it definitely seems like marks, like someone's attacked him. And they also find the Morse code lights, which is where Darby tells Sian about what she saw that night. So that leads to them going on the mission. So as I said, the snowmobile breaks down. They randomly find like an abandoned car, which isn't that unusual because we've had this snowstorm out in the middle of nowhere, and it's possible someone was driving. Now, where the bodies are, who knows, but I guess it's feasible that someone's car broke down in the middle of the storm and they sort of desperately tried to get to safety. It could be one of the guests, although they came in on a plane. But like, anyway, they find the car, and once again another AI touch, because it turns out then you start the engine on a keypad rather than it being like a traditional key. And then so they're off again, but then before you know it, they come off the road. And before that, Sian tells Darby that she gives like her a reason why Andy's got a safe room, because like Darby is suspicious about why he would have a safe room. Like he had no idea there was going to be a snowstorm. And Sian says apparently it's because even though the predictions are that 2050 is the date where we're really going to get like dire climate change issues, she says then Andy believes then the date is even before then, so he's built himself a safe room in preparation for that kind of thing. So that's just another little touch, and once again it's very up in the air really whether like, well, Andy, who seems to have this belief in technology as a way to battle climate control, but then you've got like Bill and Rohan at the other ends of things who seem very opposed and concerned about future technology. But things get really serious when the car comes off the road, and like you know Darby's going to survive because it's only episode 4, but you could definitely imagine then Sian's going to die because we've already had 2 victims so far. And there's a lot of suspense again. This is another good bit of direction, because as Darby drops out of the car and her head is quite badly bruised, she like passes out, and it's like a transition into the flashback. And the flashback again is very character driven stuff between her and Bill. So in the flashback they confirm then this victim is the person they thought it would be, and they've used like the jury to link this stuff up, to connect things. And when they're doing like the confirmation at the morgue, Darby asks if she can look at like the possessions from the crime scene, and it turns out there's another one of these silver bits of jewelry. So that's another clue which they could maybe use to link to another victim. And there's even talk later in the episode of Darby saying, well, maybe we can go a step further and find the actual killer. And at this point, it's definitely like it's unclear if the killer in the present is the same as in the past. Possibly not, just because they were confronted with that killer in one of the flashback scenes, but I guess it's possible it could still be the same one. But Bill is nervous about doing that. Like, he's cautious, I guess naturally, and maybe shows that he's a bit more experienced and world wary. But what this episode does really well is show it does a nice subversion with the characters, where we see them get intimate in a hotel room, because we find out that they've actually got no place to stay, really, why they've been out on this trip. So they want to stay in the local area and keep pursuing things. So they have to stay in a motel, and they have almost no money, so they pull a little trick which leads to them getting a free room. Darby's actually the more aggressive one in like pursuing this and seducing Bill, and Bill gets nervous, down to him being nervous because they're out here investigating men who hurt women, who abuse women. It's a version, the fact that in the scene she is like the more confident one sexually, and you would have really have thought it would have been Bill who was more confident when it came to that kind of thing. She's more gentle with him, and they end up having sex. But that was an interesting subversion, and she was kind of the more confident when it came to this. And I don't know if it just goes to Bill's nature, then maybe he puts on a good show of being confident, but he's actually very vulnerable, and maybe it goes to something in his past, and maybe it goes to Darby's character, then I don't know, in some ways maybe she just doesn't think about these things so much. Back to the present, and Darby seems to have a concussion. The guest is like giving her a shot of morphine or something like that, they say. And again, this is a nicely done scene, just because Darby is in and out of consciousness, and it's from her point of view, so she's really straining to hear what they're saying, because Andy's in the room and is like grilling Sean. It's like, what the hell were you doing out there? But Darby, ever the detective, is trying to piece things together. Is that Sean's helmet has malfunctioned, and she can't get it off, and you've only got a certain amount of oxygen that lasts you in that thing. And again, that like links it a bit to space and being in space and on the moon, the way those helmets function. So they've really thought about this stuff. Got 2 minutes of oxygen left, so they're trying to drill into it to get it off, and Darby's getting even more desperate and frantic because she has actually started bonding with Sean in this one, and it goes right down to the wire. And just as Darby passes out, they seem to get their helmet off. Like, you kind of hear a click. Picks up, and she's in Lee's room, and Lee says no, she's okay, she's resting. And the end of the episode and the reveal, which has been speculated on online, is it appears as though Lee's son is actually Bill's son. So then Andy isn't the father. Sneezing, he has a frantic fit of sneezes, and when she asks him what just happened, he repeats the condition which Bill said he had in the past. So seems like he's probably Bill's son and it's hereditary. Whether Andy knows about it, who knows? But if he did know about it, that is an obvious motive for him to maybe be the killer, or at least to have put someone up to it. Is one complaint, then I was never really into the idea of it being revealed that he would be Bill's son, because it just seems a bit cliched and that a lot of these things do that. So the actual reveal and the way it's revealed is well done, so I can't really fault that, because it's set up in the past that Bill has this like sneezing condition, and it's a good little nugget they just insert in, and at the time you think, well, they're going to use that somehow, but I'm not sure how. Really into, like, it just feels a bit cliched. Like, in a way it would be more interesting if him and Lee just had this bond randomly, rather than there being like a romantic thing to it. But I don't think it's a big problem in this sort of a drama, because I feel like the bigger mystery is going to be who's behind this whole thing, and that there's going to be many more reveals anyway, and still plenty of suspense. So it's not like a massive thing where it's putting me off the show. Like, the show's still excellent. I just have a small little complaint about it, and once again it's down to execution, and like I said, the actual scene and the way it was handled was well done. It's just, it probably is a small complaint of mine. It's Murder at the End of the World, episode 4. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Share me out on social media. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/borednow for some extra perks, just $1 a month there. And I'll just promote something that's coming up this week, which is like a special thing that I'm doing with my co-host Rachel McDonald, and that is that we're doing a special live episode together where we will be talking about what we've been watching in the month of November, so TV and movies we've been watching for the last month. And it's something I do every month anyway with guests, but the difference this time is that we are doing it on a live stream, and you can check that out, jump in the chat, and respond to us as we discuss things live. Thursday, around about 10:30, 10:40 UK time, 5:30, 5:40 US. So check your local times. Thanks for listening, guys. Keep watching TV. See you again soon.